I'm Marisa Stone with Simon Says Social and the Systems Lounge, and I want to welcome you today to the 2017 Business Systems Virtual Summit, where we are super excited to share with you all the systems that our speakers are using to get things done. And today we have Sam Vander Wielen, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
That's right. That's perfect.
Sam Vander Wielen is here to talk with us all about the top things that you need in order to protect yourself and protect your business. This is a major topic, guys. So if you've ever been kind of confused a little bit about the legalities with regard to setting up your business, this is the place to be. Let me tell you a little bit about Sam. So she is a corporate attorney turned entrepreneur. I'm loving that.
Me too.
Helps women entrepreneurs confidently create services, courses, and content that they love because they're backed with some DIY legal protection. Sam provides online entrepreneurs with instant downloads, contracts, policies, web documents, and much more that are very, very simple to use and, more importantly, easy to understand. You simply download the legal template that you need. You fill in the blanks as you follow along with Sam's video tutorial, which not only helps you to fill everything out, but it translates all that legal jargon into real talk. And voila, you have now got yourself some legal documents, and more importantly, you are protected as a business. Sam is passionate about helping you break through any anxiety around creating courses, programs, coaching service because you're not quite sure what you want to say or how to say it in such a way that you're protecting yourself. Born and raised in Philadelphia, and there sounds like a song in there somewhere. In her free time, Sam loves to drink good coffee. I'm right there with you, girl. Go to the beach, read, exercise, and spend time with her amazing husband. Sam, welcome to the 2017 Business Systems Virtual Summit. It's so exciting to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to be here and chat with you today.
Yay! So let's begin at the beginning. What exactly does it mean for my business to be legally covered?
Yeah, sure. So this is something that's really important to talk about. This is something I think we like to maybe as women, like kind of bury our heads in the sand a little bit and say like, we'll worry about this later. We'll worry about this when we get to be a big business. So I think one of the things I just wanted to start out with, if anyone's listening to this thinking like this might not apply to them yet because maybe they have 1 client or 10 clients, so they're not quite where they want to be in their business. This applies to everyone listening. So in terms of being legally protected, this is always something that's a hard pill to swallow as an American, because this is the bad news that unfortunately I always have to deliver. Right. So unfortunately, as things stand right now in America, anyone and everyone can sue someone for something, no matter what. I could walk up to some random person on the street who I've never had a relationship with and sue him for something totally random that he didn't actually do. Yeah. And then it's the legal system's job to get rid of that, right? Mm-hmm. So I know that that's a really difficult thing to understand as an entrepreneur, that there really is no way to guarantee yourself from never being sued in your lifetime. But what we're trying to do here is put ourselves in the best position possible. Right. And so what I consider my job is the reason I provide those video tutorials is really so that women can take ownership over these legal protections, so that you understand it and then use it in the right way and use it at the right times and in the right places and with the right clients, Right. So when we're talking about legal protection, I just want to make sure that we're clear that we're not talking about guaranteeing that you can ever get sued. Right. That's what insurance is for. And that doesn't protect you from being sued, but it protects you from, you have an attorney that's provided for you so that you're not paying and so that your business is not exposed. But that's a separate issue. And that's something I work with women to make sure they have the right kind in place. Right. But when we're talking about legal protection, we're making sure that if, God forbid, you ever got into a dispute with a client or, something didn't work out, that you did have the right systems in place that you put you in the best position possible.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So let's make this a little more real. Mm-hmm. Why should I, as Jane Doe entrepreneur, be concerned with covering my business? I just started out. I have very few clients. I'm not really doing anything that I can think of that anybody would sue me for.
Yeah. And this is the part where sometimes I wish I could change my brain and undo this, but this is the part that really helps my clients, which I'm glad for them. But unfortunately, I can tell you from experience, I've seen it time and time again. I have seen family members sue each other. I have seen friends who went into business relationships sue each other. I have seen, instances where women who had become like maybe even just friendly with a client, they thought it was like, oh my goodness, we had become like so close that I was so comfortable. I had let my guard down, I never thought that person. So one thing is just that unfortunately as attorneys, we're kind of taught not to trust that, and that we want to be careful. We also want to be professional. I think it comes off as very professional when you have a relationship with a new client and you say, hey, okay, great, I'm so excited to work together. Here's a copy of my client agreement. I think that's really professional.
Yeah,
they take it seriously. They're signing on the dotted line. They understand very clearly what the terms of your working relationship are, what services are being provided, what are not being provided. Even something as simple as like for a lot of my coaching clients, like what time of day the coach is available by text or email.
right.
If maybe they set that boundary, something like this. So, we're worried about for those kind of practical reasons, but then there are very, very serious business reasons, which we can get into later, but are very complicated, or I shouldn't say they're very complicated, but they're more complicated, but are more about protecting your business in the legal and financial sense. So, that's where we get into having a business entity that's set up outside of ourselves personally, so that we are not personally liable. And that's kind of a bigger thing that we can talk about.
Okay, cool. So, but isn't all this legal stuff really just for big companies, the ones with the fancy websites and the big offices and the secretary sitting outside answering the phone and all of, I'm pretty little in the sea of, businesses that are out there.
Yeah, I totally understand feeling that way. As I always tell my clients, you could have an issue with your first client or your 100th client. There's really no rhyme or reason or logic as to, okay, now I have 175 clients and now I should start to worry about this.
Right.
There's really unless you're thinking about it from a financial perspective, but that's kind of why I'm providing the service I am, because I'm trying to make this stuff affordable and accessible for the everyday female entrepreneur.
Right.
But unfortunately, you have to think of it two ways too. Like your first client, it's not just about them suing you. I think we worry about that part, but let's turn the tables and worry about us having to go after them. So your first client could agree with you that, let's say you offer like an installment payment plan, and they agreed to pay you $500 a month for 3 months, and they pay you month 1, you're providing the services, you're doing the work, and on month 2, you say, hey, Billy, your credit card got denied, I need that money. And Billy stops responding to you, and you've already provided the work.
Right.
That can be your first client. Like what's the difference? Why would it be any different if it was that client versus your 100th client?
Right. And I like the way that you flipped that, right? Because protecting your business and protecting yourself is not necessarily just protecting yourself from being sued.
Yes.
It's also protecting the other side of that and protecting you so that you're able to collect those, those monies that are owed to you so you can continue to do your work. So that makes total sense.
I think it's really important too for us as women entrepreneurs to set the boundaries and what I always like to call like the rules and regs of our businesses. So, even things as simple as like putting up my DIY templates, for example, include for you to lay out what your return policy is or what your refund policy is. Even things as simple as that, cancellation policies for people who host appointments with people and then they don't show up and you've now held a spot. That's particularly important for women who are in a time for money trade business. Right. So there are lots of different things, but it really also puts you in the driver's seat. And I do think, and I think a lot of my clients would agree that it makes them feel, and they often tell me this, makes them feel very professional, like to have this stuff in place and have a very clear system where they say like, refer to my refund policy here, like that you agreed to when you purchased this thing on my site or in my agreement. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah. And it's also, like you mentioned earlier, right? It takes you up a notch. It makes you look so much more professional. You've got all these things in place so that there are no questions and no confusion, right?
Definitely.
Okay. So you've convinced me. I need to make sure that I am protecting myself legally. What do I really need to be doing here? And perhaps more importantly, what do I not need to be doing?
Yeah, sure. So I see a lot in the space about people being very concerned about trademarks and copyrights. So that's one big piece. The second big piece I would consider is more business focus. So I'll talk about that first. So in the business space, I kind of see it as a tree with two big branches on it, and it only has two branches. But the one branch is your website. So because most of us are so driven by our sites now, a lot of us might be selling things like me. I'm selling things off of my website, directly off my website. Even a coach or something where you're advertising your coaching package and maybe the person goes there to sign up to work with you or to fill out a form or something. So that is one big branch, our website. The second one is when you're working with people now. So now you're working with people maybe one-on-one, maybe in a coaching session or some kind of like a webinar or something like this, or you're doing like courses, ebooks, you're writing books, things like that, maybe a wider audience.
Right.
So in terms of that first branch for our website, there are three huge things that people need to be concerned about. The first is a disclaimer, which is very important because what I like to say about a disclaimer is that it tells people who you are, what you do, and what you don't. And I consider the what you don't the most important part.
Yeah.
Especially in the coaching space, I think it's really important that people understand that you're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer, or like in my case, like I am a licensed attorney, but I'm not practicing law and I'm not your attorney, I'm just a attorney.
Right.
Or you're not a therapist, or you might be a trainer, but you're not their trainer in person. So they need to make sure that they're physically capable of doing what you're suggesting, things like this. Or in the business coaching world, you need to protect yourself in that way, that you can't guarantee profits and you can't guarantee certain outcomes. Your testimonials are just that. They're just examples. They're not guarantees of how your situation will turn out.
Right.
So that's the disclaimer part. We also have the privacy policy part, because at least in America, if you're collecting personal information on your website, then you need to have this privacy policy in place that very clearly and distinctly describes to people when, where, and how and why you're collecting information from them. And even to the nitty-gritty from like how the behind the scenes of your site is collecting information from them. So for a lot of women that I speak to, they don't even know the answers to those questions, but I at least guide them in the direction of telling them where they can go or who they can speak to, where they can get that information. And the third huge piece are the terms and conditions.
Right.
So I consider that kind of the rules and regs. So that's where we're putting our return policy and our cancellation policy, our payment processing policy, all of that kind of stuff. That's really your opportunity to lay it out, but also a huge one is to disclaim liability. I have arbitration clauses built in, all kinds of things. So those are the three big components to your website. And then when we're working with people one-on-one, that's where we start to get into the contract world. So if you're working with someone only one-on-one privately, you need a very specific client agreement between you and person A, whoever you're working with. Right. When you're starting to offer courses, programs, big time services like that, you need what are called terms of use. And I refer to them as terms of use for online programs. So you need those because then that's something that somebody reads and reviews before they opt in and purchase your course online.
Right. That totally makes sense. And I like the way that you broke this down into two different segments. I never really would have thought that there are certain things that you have to have on your website in order to maintain this level of protection. I can totally understand the other side of it when I'm working with individuals or I'm working with groups or whatever, but that's very, very interesting that you actually need all of these different components on your website to make sure that you're protected. So
yeah, that part almost concerns me more as an attorney, because you when you're going to establish a relationship with a client, obviously you're aware that you're establishing
right.
that relationship. You're emailing back and forth, you're coming to right. terms about price and time and all of these things.
Right.
And so that makes sense. And then it's very simple to have an agreement that you send to them, you have them sign and send back or e-sign. But I worry more about random Sally, who lives in California, going on your website, maybe making one of your recipes, having an allergy to something that was in there and turning around and suing you for it.
Right, right. Yeah. So I know you've alluded to some of these, but what are some other ways in which I can limit risk for my business? I know you work with your clients a lot about risk limitations and things. How can I limit risk?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, one big way is to have these systems in place, right? So to have these documents in place so that you can refer back to them. But again, we go back to this idea that unfortunately someone could sue you. So we're not limiting risk in that way, but we're limiting the risk in the sense that if God forbid they do sue you, then you have these things to point back to and say, well, you did review this before you started working with me, and this
Right.
is what I had in place. That's one way. Another big way, or there are other several ways that you could limit your risk, like that I work with women on all the time. So we talk a lot about the language that people use. So obviously being very careful about making like huge guarantees. Like
Right.
if you're a business coach, I will make sure you reach 6 figures in 3 months, I don't something like this. So obviously working on our language. Um, if you can only afford to do one thing when you're starting out, I think the disclaimer is huge, because that's a big way to limit your risk, is like, well, I told you I wasn't a doctor and you still went ahead and tried the supplement, so that's not my problem.
Right.
Um, so that's a huge way. Obviously, what's written on our website, in general, what's written on our blog posts, letting people know when things are sponsored or an ad, letting people know if it's an affiliate so they don't come back and blame you for something,
Right.
encouraging caution where it's possible, just trying to be smart in that way. But I also, it's really funny that when people, by the time women reach out to me and we talk about risk, one of the biggest ways you can protect yourself is like, when I speak to them, I'll say, oh, so what kind of system do you have in place now for this? Like, what are you doing? Like, oh, well, I text back and forth with like people to set up my agreement with, like, I'll
Right.
take 350. No, I'll take 375 a month. That's a huge way to limit risk, is to stop doing that and
Yeah.
start treating this like the business that you actually have. Accept
Right.
the fact that you have a business, whether you have one client or 100 clients,
Right.
and put these systems in place.
Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense. So I know you alluded to this a little bit earlier. What are your thoughts? Do I truly need to hire an attorney to ensure that my business remains legal?
Yeah, so this is where my business kind of gets interesting, because I'm in the in-between space. So what I
Right.
do is I provide these DIY legal templates, and then because in America all 50 states have 50 different plus laws, and everything is so convoluted and complicated, and we all have such different businesses.
Yeah.
What I do is I say to the women that I work with, take these templates, go in, fill them out, but then have a local attorney review them.
Yeah.
That's what I suggest. Some
Yeah.
people choose not to, but that is on them. I not only suggest it, I strongly urge and encourage them.
That,
Um, so if you are, not able to sleep at night because you're really concerned about this, or making sure you're doing things the right way, I would work with someone locally. I think the more important part, though, about working with an attorney locally, and maybe this is kind of in conjunction with an accountant, depending on where you live, is making sure you have the right entity set up, and then making sure that you're financially doing the right things based on where you live.
right.
Um, there are also issues that come up all the time, which people ask me about, like where they live, maybe the county or the city requires that they register as a business as well,
Right.
in addition to registering on the state level. And it's also getting very complicated in the online space when women like myself live and work around Philadelphia, but I do business with people all over the world now. Um,
Right.
so that gets very complicated too. And that might be where you start talking to an attorney saying, okay, this has gotten a little bit bigger than, maybe it was before, and I should speak
Yeah.
with somebody.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So one of the questions that I always get out of clients who are just starting out is, how do I know if I want to be a sole proprietorship, an LLC, an S corp? Like, how do I choose? And perhaps this is one of those conversations you need to sit down with an attorney and have.
Right.
But can you guide women on what the differences are and which one they might want to go with, or at least might want to sit down and talk with an attorney about?
Yeah, sure. So this is something that is extremely state specific. So the first thing I do is I encourage women to Google literally wherever you live, like Pennsylvania business incorporation, or start a business Pennsylvania, or something like that.
Right.
You can also Google the name of where you live, and usually like Department of Business or Business Incorporation, something like that.
Right.
And go to the state specific website. Please do not go to any of these websites that come up that are from like LegalZoom or any of that other stuff, because half the time it's not written actually even by lawyers, but also you just want to go with what your state is telling you, and give states a little bit of credit here, because I tried to kind of guide the women in the right direction. All the states that I've checked so far have really helpful websites. They're usually like a PDF download or something with a step-by-step guide that help you to set up the businesses, but they also will explain to you that in your state, what that difference is between an LLC and a sole proprietorship,
Right.
blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I would encourage you to explore the LLC option. I don't think I've had a situation so far where a woman has not been an LLC, no matter where they've lived. I obviously am not familiar with LLC laws in every single state, but I can't see a reason why you wouldn't want to be. But that is something, you can also talk to your accountant about that. So that might be something that when you sit down and you start talking to them about, how do I set up this business account and then manage my profits and expenses and all of these things, they should be very familiar as well with whether the business that you're starting is better for an LLC or whatever. So the nice thing about, at least where I live, and I'm licensed in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and so where I'm from, an LLC protects us personally. So that is usually the most beneficial way to go, but that's obviously something you want to ask about.
Obviously, yeah, totally. So what about liability insurance? I know that depending on what you're doing, liability insurance might be important, or it may be something that, may or may not be, on the top of your list of protecting yourself. What are your thoughts about liability insurance?
I think it's absolutely necessary. I mean, I like having it. I just feel better knowing I have it. I don't really understand why you would operate without it. Even somebody who could literally defend myself, I don't want to have to. And so I like having my business protected in that way. You definitely want to speak to somebody about liability insurance. You want to make sure you speak with someone who's familiar with business insurance, because we obviously have insurance of all kinds. We don't want to call our Geico or something like this. So you want to talk to an agent. I have someone personally who works with somebody in all 50 states if anyone ever needs a recommendation.
Nice.
The thing I like about him is that I started a crazy non-traditional business. There are not very many people doing this at all. And he was able to be like, okay, tell me what you're doing. Tell me how you're doing it. Tell me everything. And then write it out for me. And then we're going to get you a policy.
Right.
You really need someone who's going to do that with you, especially if you're in the online space. This is one of the biggest reasons I started my business, because when I used to talk to the lawyers that I worked with and would tell them how huge this online space is, they would look at you like they have no idea that this is. So you really want an insurance agent who also understands, what does it mean to be a coach? What does it mean to be a health coach, for example, that has Skype or Zoom sessions with people over the phone who live in Thailand and California?
Right.
They need to be familiar, just like they need to be familiar with me having DIY legal templates and not establishing an attorney-client relationship.
Right.
So first is that we want to make sure we find somebody who is a business, probably providing business insurance. You want to ask them about professional liability insurance. That's very important. Depending on your business and where you work physically, like if you work out of your house, if you work in an office, if you drive to clients' houses, you want to try talking to them about commercial general liability policies.
Right.
But like I said, if you're talking to an experienced insurance agent, they should be familiar with all of these issues.
Right. That's really, really good advice. I definitely think that having an insurance person who actually understands those things is super important. Otherwise, you're trying to backtrack and explain everything. And I know we're coming to the end of this interview, and I hate that because I'm really, really enjoying this conversation. But there's a couple more questions I have before we let you go. What about my mobile phone? You alluded to this a little bit earlier, not really doing business via text message. But what about my mobile phone or computer files? Because sometimes I do open or close files on a mobile device, open or close files, of course, on my computer, things like that. What do I need to know to protect myself about using those tools?
Do you mean in terms of privacy of the information from your clients?
Privacy of the information, whether or not that's even, because I know that there's a lot of security,
Yes.
Some of the stuff that I work with, you really want those files to remain secure, things like that. What do I need to think about?
Yeah, so that's something that's big that I have built into my privacy policy template, because I really give people the opportunity to spell out what you do, to like what steps do you take, what systems you have in place to protect people's information. And then when you're working with people one-on-one, like this is especially big for my coaching clients where they're getting into maybe some more personal information and they have access to people's maybe like health history or something like that. That's where it's built into the client agreement about how you're going to take steps. What I always say is that the thing that you want to be the most careful about is that whatever you tell people that you do, that's what you actually do. And we all make mistakes. We obviously can't protect ourselves from being hacked or something like that. I mean, if somebody really wanted to get into our stuff nowadays, they probably can. Right. But you want to tell them what systems you do have in place. And obviously, I would encourage you as an entrepreneur, maybe if you're not the most tech savvy person, that's okay. I was not when I first started. I built my website that I have now because, as we talked about in the beginning of the call, I like to teach myself these things, but I knew that I needed certain security systems in place. And so I am very clear about having those in place, and I check on them. I make sure that they're up and running. I make sure that the plugins are updated on my website. So I do my due diligence as a business owner to make sure that I'm delivering on what I'm saying I'm actually doing. Right. So whatever it is that you have in place, just be honest about it and then be diligent about it.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So I know we are going to take a much, much deeper dive in the next interview, but before we let you go, how can people reach out to you if they want to perhaps just email you with questions, perhaps take advantage of some of these templates, take a course from you? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. So the best place to find me is probably on my website, samvanderwielen.com, which I think we have a link to below on this page. So you can just head down to that link. I hope you like it as much as I do. I spent a lot of time building that website. I think it's very pretty. And so you can definitely reach me through my website. Email, I'm lightning fast with email. So I would love to hear from you. There's a contact page on my website, or you can also just find my email address on there, which is sam@samvanderwielen.com. If you want to hop on my email list, once a week I send out an email chock full of tips, not only in the legal space, because legal gets really boring really fast. So we talk about legal, but we also talk about, I like to talk a lot about self-care, because I actually was a health coach. When I first left the law, I became a health coach first. So I talk a lot about self-care as an entrepreneur. So if you want to stay in touch in that way, I would love to have you on my email list. Which I believe if you hop on below, we have the 10-step free checklist, which is called the Build Your Own Business Checklist, which is really like what I like to call a 30,000 foot zoom view of your business. Right. So you can grab that below and then you'll be on my email list. In terms of social media, I'm the most active on Instagram for whatever reason. I'm a picture person, and I like to be active on Instagram. So I interact with people the most there, but we also have links below to my Facebook page and Pinterest, Twitter, all of those kinds of things.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate all the information and how open you've been with the audience today about all the stuff that maybe is a little difficult to swallow or talk about, but is so, so important to hear. So guys, if you are part of the All Access Pass, stick around, because we are going to dive so much deeper in just a few minutes into the things that you need to be doing to make sure that you're protecting yourself and your business. Click on those links below. Take advantage of the resources that Sam is sharing with you here today and figure out for yourself how to pull in some protection to make sure that your system is in place if you were ever in a position where either you were being sued or somebody was not paying you and you needed to go and collect. So for those of you that aren't part of the All Access Pass, thank you so much for being part of the 2017 Business Systems Virtual Summit, and we will see all of you in the next interview. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.